Let's bring you some other news now on the programme. Russians are more pessimistic about the state of their economy than at any point in the past 2 decades. This according to new research by the polling agency Gallup. And among the findings, Gallup says that 60% of respondents replied that their economic conditions were getting worse, while confidence in the Russian military is down to 66%, that from 80 in 2022. All this then in a context where Ukraine is stepping up attacks on Russian soil, targeting in particular oil refineries. This week, Vladimir Putin acknowledging for the first time that Russia is facing fuel shortages. Well, with me now to discuss the findings of that research is Benedict Vigers. He is a senior global news writer at Gallup. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us here on France 24.
Thanks for having me.
Look, do we get a sense then from this research that the war that Ukraine is now waging on Russia is really starting to have an impact on Russian people?
Yeah, good question. So we've been at Gallup surveying Russia for the past 2 decades, including every year since the war began in 2022. And over that time, we've seen some really quite interesting shifts in Russian public opinion across a whole host of things, but particularly the economy. And in the early days and weeks and even years of the war, Russian public opinion actually became quite positive. It increased across a whole range of measures in a sort of rally around the flag effect. But the past 12 months, we've seen a real shift in how Russians are feeling about much of their lives, including the economy, and a really dramatic downturn. So as you say, we ask this question about whether people think their local economic conditions are getting better or worse. And this year, 6 in 10 adults said they're getting worse. That's up more than 20 points in a single year. It's also the first time more than half of Russians have ever expressed pessimism in any year going back more than 2 decades, and really speaks to the shift in just how much the toll of the war and the wider context around Russia and its economy are being felt among ordinary people.
Yeah, let's talk a bit then about the methodology of this research that your organisation has been conducting. You spoke to 1,000 people. In the great scheme of things, that's not that many Russians. How representative do you think these findings are?
Yeah, so this is part of our very well-established Gallup World Poll, which is an annual survey of around 140 countries every year. And in most of those countries, including Russia, we survey 1,000 adults, which gives you a pretty good level of statistical precision at the national level. They're all surveyed via telephone, random digit dialing and weighted to be nationally representative of the adult population. And our consistent annual methodology year to year and probability-based sample approach means we can be very confident that these do reflect real and meaningful shifts in the attitudes of ordinary Russians.
And look, you say this is a survey that you conduct in countries all around the world. In Russia, at least, the questions were asked between the middle of March and the beginning of May of this year. Is there anything particular about the challenges that your researchers face in the Russian context? I don't know if it's more difficult to conduct this research in Russia than, I don't know, perhaps France or the United States.
Yeah, I mean, there are challenges conducting research in many parts of the world. Russia is certainly one of them, but we've been able to keep doing so on an annual basis every year for 20 years. And I think one of the really interesting things about our most recent survey is that if you looked at the previous few years since the war began in Russia, you might be forgiven for thinking that there isn't necessarily a major war going on. Public opinion remained pretty buoyant. But this year, we've really seen a shift in the number of people not just feeling these things, but willing to tell survey interviewers these things. And it's not just limited to the economy, as you said in your introduction. We've also seen very significant shifts in how Russians feel about the structures and the institutions that govern their lives. So this year, 66% of Russians say they have confidence in their national military. That's still high. It's 2 in 3 people, but it's down 13 points on the year. We've seen a similar drop in confidence in national government, down 14 points, 16 points for the honesty of elections. That's the biggest annual drop in these measures in Russia going back 2 decades. And I think the most significant shift we've seen is in that question of, do the media in your country have a lot of freedom or not? In 2025, that was a record high. Russians had never been more positive about their media freedoms, at least in how they responded to our survey. But this year, it's gone from a record high all the way down to a record low of 34 points. And that is a really quite rare phenomenon in our work polling the world in a whole host of countries. It's very unusual for a country on any measure to go from a record high to a record low in consecutive years. Again, just emphasizing how much has changed in Russian public opinion, particularly in the last 12 months.
Fascinating to talk to you. Thank you so much, Benedict Vigers, talking to us there from the polling agency Gallup about their findings in Russia.